Elizabeth Grace Matthew. Love her name. She's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I'm going to bring her over to the show right now. Good morning, Elizabeth. How are you?
Good morning, Eden. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. It's such an honor to meet you, and I think very highly of Young Voices. How long have you been with Young Voices?
Since January. So this is
Okay.
my first stint with them. It's been such a great experience.
Oh, well, wonderful, wonderful. It's so nice to have you here. And I assume you're coming from Philadelphia?
I am, yes. Is that where you're from as well?
I grew up in Chester County. So not
Okay.
Chester County. So
Nearby.
yeah, so between the New York Yankees and the Philadelphia Phillies, I really didn't have a choice in life.
That's
so,
right.
but it's so great to have you here. Can you share with our audience, since you are a new Young Voices contributor to this audience, share a little bit about your background? I mean, I won't do it justice. You have such a phenomenal background. Can you share a little bit with what you have been doing and what you're doing now?
Sure, thank you. So my background's in higher education. I taught writing as well as leadership theory and communication and literature in the academy for a little over a decade. I
Mhm.
have a master's in English literature and a doctorate in higher education.
Mm.
So, that's where I really spent my early career. And this past year, I left higher ed to pursue writing full time. So I've been doing that since this past August,
Mhm.
and it's been a great adventure. And I've gotten to do so many cool things. I write about religion, politics,
Mhm.
education, which of course is where I have some expertise in terms of my background,
Yeah.
and Young Voices has been such a great help in
Mhm.
finding awesome places to publish and folks like yourself to speak with. So it's just been an awesome experience so far. I have 3 little boys, and I live in the Philly area with them. Yeah, and
Uh,
my husband as well. Mhm.
I figured your husband was in the background because I
Yes.
was reading a little bit about him as well. Can I ask you? I know this isn't really a part of the interview that we talked about, but I'm curious. Did you choose to leave higher education because of what's happening, or was it just because you were ready to move on to your next step of your career journey, if you will?
That's a great question. Not really, no. I actually chose to leave mostly because I, had never been able to kind of do the intellectual work that I wanted to do in terms of writing and
Mhm.
whatnot. I never got on the tenure track because I really kind of foregrounded family, and
Mhm.
I didn't want to have to move all over the country or take whatever job was offered. And so we really prioritized, my husband's career in terms of um, him doing what he could to make sure that I had the ability to be flexible with our
Mhm.
children. So while I did work full time, I also had a great deal of flexibility in my on campus roles. But once our youngest got to be about 3 and my husband had made partner, we were in a position where,
Yeah.
my youngest got to be about 1 and my husband had made partner. We were in a position where I was able to step back from the, schedule that was set by a department or whatnot, and stop supervising classes or teaching and grading. Grading's the big thing when you teach writing,
Yeah.
and start pursuing some of what I really wanted to do in terms of my own writing.
Yeah, no, that's no, thank you for explaining that. I have a lot of people here on the show really talking about the education factors, whether it's elementary ed to last week, I had Drexel University professor on talking about curriculum versus co-curriculum. And so that's education is very important to me on so many different levels. From the trade aspect to the undergrad aspect to what's ahead for our college graduates now, what's on their plates, what do they do now? And even the high school graduates, just that whole transformation of our culture. So let's talk culture. When I worked for Senator Santorum from the great state of Pennsylvania, who wears
Yes.
suits, not
Hmm.
like Fetterman. I'm going to put that one in there. um, I had the honor of serving on his conference committee, and we were very much focused on culture, faith in the public square, lifting the good, the true, and the beautiful. And this was back in early 2000s. And in that time period, it made an impact on my personal journey, but also on my professional journey. So let's talk about the culture. Let's talk about what you have been writing, you wrote about Mother's Day. You wrote about the special tree in Brooklyn, which I absolutely love because I'm all about featuring books here. You're talking about school choice. There's so many different, I call them culture wars. I think we see a lot of things we are constantly combating in a day-to-day basis. What are we going to face when we wake up in the morning? So let's do the easy piece first. Let's talk about the Mother's Day feature that you talked about. Let's talk about bringing back Mother's Day. You talked about it in The Hill. Let's talk about, I'm not a mother, and you heard me talk about that. I'm not a mom, but I get to love on a bunch of kids. And has Mother's Day, let's ask this, has Mother's Day really been, as you quote said, more commercialized than ever? The Hallmark holiday, if you will, where it has completely lost the focus on what Mother's Day really intended it to be, and because of the culture issues.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's some of it. I think a lot of the issue around Mother's Day is that it's really a privatized holiday. You know, we treat it a lot like Valentine's Day.
Mhm.
So the impetus for my article was sort of these companies sending these emails, you know, do you want to opt out of Mother's Day text messages, Mother's Day reminders, etc. And I'm in no way opposed to people doing that. If, you know, if you just lost your mom, do you want to get emails from Target saying,
No
can you
way.
buy this? Right.
No
And
way.
I understand that. Who wants that emotional, you know, weight on them just when they're opening their phone to check a text message? So I'm not in any way opposed to that. But I think it's sort of sad that Mother's Day has become a thing that's so privatized that that's how you'd feel about it.
Yeah.
So the original purpose of Mother's Day was actually founded by a woman who herself did not have children.
Hmm.
And she was founding it to honor her late mother. So it was her mother had already passed and she didn't have children. So in today's sort of understanding, she would be exactly the type of person that
Hmm.
would want to block those text messages.
Right.
But instead, she founded Mother's Day because she really saw it as a national celebration of, you know, the nurture, the care, and the civic education that mothers provide.
Hmm.
And it was founded in our native Philadelphia
I
by
didn't realize that.
yes, John Wanamaker helped
Oh, of
her
course,
to found it.
Wanamaker's. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yes. And so, you know, my sort of vision for Mother's Day. Now, don't get me wrong. I am a mother. I have 3 little kids. My mother is, you know, still alive, which is such a blessing, and still healthy, which is an even greater blessing. And
Yes.
you know, that's a wonderful thing. And I had a great Mother's Day with my kids and my mom, and that's awesome. And I really did enjoy, you know, the cards I received and all those beautiful things. But my vision for Mother's Day, so that it would be more inclusive, which is a word that I know sometimes we hear and we don't
Yeah.
like what it means.
Yeah.
But this is a way in which I think we could use the word inclusive to mean something really positive, so that it would be more like St. Patrick's Day,
Yeah.
right? It would be more like, you know, everybody's Irish on St. Patrick's
Yeah.
Day, whether you're Irish or not. Well, everyone can celebrate motherhood on Mother's Day, whether you're a mother or not.
Yeah.
And I think that was sort of the impetus for my writing the article, was to say, you know, I don't begrudge people opting out of these silly corporate messages, but isn't it sad that that's what our celebration of motherhood has come to? That it's sort of this privatized, commercialized, individual thing, as opposed to something a lot more broad and national and unifying.
Well, I was reading my pastor in New York, Pastor Tim Keller, passed away on Friday, and I know a lot of people. I'm sure you recognize his name from everything he's done. One of the books I'm rereading is Every Good Endeavor, talking about our work. And as I was reading my devotional and also reading the same chapter, it popped up this morning. It talked about the public service of being the mother, of contributing to the community, the masks that we wear, whether it's planting a garden, whether it's a farmer, whether it is a tradesman, or whether it is the mother who stays at home. And you really, in many ways, I think you bring that out in this article. And
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so.
yeah,
That was my goal.
yeah, no, it really does. It struck me because I was reading your article again this morning, and I was reading that side by side, and I thought, you know, I think we forget. I think we forget what's going on within our hearts, and then what's going on in the chaos of our homes, and then the chaos of this world. And that the mothers out there, the mama bears out there, they are doing a powerful service to our community and to our nation by raising the next generation, as are you. And that is powerful work. as he talks about in Every Good Endeavor. So I just wanted to bring that up and thank you for citing that. I think that's very powerful. Um, what kind of responses did you get when you posted this article? What was the responses? Was it, um, those who on the Hill, knowing the Hill is a very political focused audience, what kind of responses did you get when you put this out there?
I mostly got really positive responses.
Mm,
And I think a lot of that's because so many of us are longing for things that unify us.
yes.
Whatever our individual ideas, I think a lot of us are longing for things that we can celebrate together. There are fewer and
Yeah.
fewer things that bind us as everyone. And even those of us who aren't mothers, right? We had mothers, and we help mothers by doing, whether, as you said yourself, mentoring children, or
Mhm.
whether helping with nieces or nephews or
Yep.
grandchildren,
Yeah.
as those other roles in children's lives, and helping mothers, whether you're a teacher, right, who helps a mom by
Mhm.
helping to educate her children, or
Yes.
whatever, a nurse, helps deliver babies, whatever the case might be. We all are directly related to the idea of raising the next generation. And so I was happy for the positive response. And I think it reflects that a lot of people are just really looking for those unifying narratives that can bring us
Mhm. Yeah. Another thing that definitely brings us together is the love of literature, the love of reading, and the love of our history and our family history. And I'm going to switch over to the book that you were referring to in Real Clear Books and Culture. A Tree Grows in Brooklyn at 80. I absolutely love the story. And I've already shared it on the stream for those who are following on the social media stream so they can go pick it up. I do a lot of book features here at Common Sense America. So, talk to me about the background of this story and talk to me about the responses you got through this and the love of literature bringing it together, whether it is someone listening to it or somebody reading it or somebody being read to. Let's talk about this beautiful story in Brooklyn.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Yeah, A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, it was one of my favorite books as a teenager. It really is a story of the power of family, the power of motherhood in many respects.
Uh-huh.
Both the grandmother and the mother in the story are sort of the moral and educational centers. And it's also a story of, America, of the ways in which poor people who came here from other countries
Mhm.
were marginalized by some of the corporatism that existed even in that time. And as the cities began to be remade in ways that, you know, um, made the poor unwelcome in their own communities, as those communities were remade in sort of early versions of creating what the book terms as slums, right? So that they
Right.
did not have decent places to live. And then it's also the story of grit and triumph. The tree that grows outside the window of Francie's apartment, her tenement apartment in Brooklyn in the 1910s, which is when the
Yes.
story is set. That that tree is emblematic of Francie herself, right? It's a representation of her grit, the fact that despite being in conditions that do not lend to growth or to flourishing, she does grow and she does flourish. And
Yes.
although she's not able to attend high school because she needs to work to support her family, she manages to get herself into college.
Mm.
And it's also about, in many ways, the universal bittersweetness of growing up,
Yeah.
right? It's about the gains, the losses that come with not just her own growth, but her family's growth.
Mhm.
Toward the end of the book, her mother gets remarried after her father has sadly passed away, and they're going to be much more financially secure in the new home.
Mhm.
And there's tremendous gains that go with that. And there's also losses, right? Because there's the leaving behind of everything she's known and the leaving behind of the way that she's lived. And those are certainly the types of universal human stories that literature is supposed to bring us all together to appreciate.
Yeah. No, I absolutely love that. When I was reading it, I went back to my childhood and I thought about growing up in Chester County, but I also had the opportunity to grow up in my grandmother's backyard in northern New Jersey. And being so close to New York City, you're constantly surrounded by Jewish families, Eastern European families. All my family's Hungarian. So having that culture and being surrounded by those stories and what they overcame during that time period. My great grandparents followed each other over on the boat Ellis Island, and one was chasing the other, and they always joked about it. But the mere piece of the importance of the story was they took that step of faith, coming over, starting a family, starting a business that lasted 3 different generations. And so that speaks a lot to, it just reminded me so much of, you talk about that universal peace. It reminded me so much of that and what I learned. I feel as though I'm a better person having grown up around all of those different cultures. And I can't get enough of it, even to this day. When I lived in New York City, I loved going over to the Jewish neighborhoods. I loved going to Brooklyn. I love the Italian aspect. And there was just something so powerful about that foundation of family and that foundation of hope. And I see that as you did that article, that's what I pulled from that article. So thank you for doing that. I really appreciate it. So let's switch again. And I know Anders loves when I do this because I do this with a lot of the different young voices. I just boom, boom, boom. He's like, you go, girl. Um, I was looking at your Twitter account, and you have quite a bit of other articles. I saw the Lean In article that you had talked about. I'd love to. I We have a few more minutes. I want to grab a couple more minutes with you. The Lean In article, and then also the school choice interview. I was listening to both of them, and they both were just filled with goodness. And so I want to do a little bit of a deep dive with you on the Lean In article, and because I talked about Nikki Haley in the beginning, so let's talk about women in leadership, women of influence, and women at the greatest levels of government, to the mama bears who are at the kitchen table, who are making decisions that are more powerful than the women at the highest levels of government. Let's talk about that. Share with us the background on your article on Lean In.
Sure, thank you. So in 2013, about a decade ago, many of your listeners might remember Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In came out, and it really was written as a response to an article that had run in The Atlantic the year before, which was Anne Marie Slaughter's Why Women Still Can't Have It All, which had run in 2012 in The Atlantic. And Slaughter was a woman who had always worked full time, but she had been in academia. And so, like myself, she had the kind of flexible schedule that enabled her to both work full time and be very present with her children.
Mm-hmm.
And when she went to work in the State Department under Hillary Clinton, she realized that a normal, sort of normative, traditional 9 to 5 that was also in, Washington, D.C. when she lives in Princeton, right, would
Right.
not lend itself to the
Right.
ability to be present for her children in the way that she was used to and in the way that she wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so she wrote this article that talked about how, given the way that work is structured and given the way that the expectations on the nuclear family are, fewer people live around extended family, et cetera.
Yeah.
Right. She wrote an article that explained how few women can, quote unquote, have it all. And she talks very frankly in that piece about how she had kind of always sat in judgment of the women that fell off the competitive professional track to be home with their children, and how she then found herself doing the same thing, right? Stepping back from her position. Now, mind you, she was still in a very competitive, job as a competitive professor at Princeton, but, she found herself stepping back to be more with her children. She was talking about that. Well, Sheryl Sandberg's response was sort of, in many ways a rebuttal that was arguing that there are things that you as a woman, as a mother, can do that will make your life work even as you ascend to the highest ranks of your profession, like being the CEO of Facebook, as Sandberg herself is.
Right.
And, I think that there were a lot of elisions in that book, a lot of things that were left out, a lot of things that were really glossed over and not entirely truthful, right?
Yeah.
For example, one anecdote that Sandberg tells is, well, here's how you can get home by 5:30. And so your family, your kids can eat at 5:30 and be in bed by 7:30, and you can get back to work. And it completely glosses over the fact that for the average working woman, someone has to make the dinner that's at 5:30. Right?
I mean, she didn't put that in there. No
So,
recipe, no recipes, no nothing, right?
Right. So there's a huge, just obfuscation of how much labor women at the top of these types of very competitive, lucrative fields tend to be purchasing from mostly other women, right? Who are winding up cooking the meals and caring for the children and, doing all the things that their jobs don't enable them to
Mhm.
to do.
Mhm.
And so, I kind of talked about that in relation to today, where there is a little bit more flexibility inherent in the technology,
Yeah.
but also where, most women in every society that has the opportunity for them to do so, not every woman, not all women are the same, but the majority of women are more likely than not to wish to, if finances were no object,
Mhm.
step back to spend more time with their children. More than half of women say they would like to work part time when they have
Yeah.
children in the home.
Mhm.
And that's something that the Lean In, um, the book, as well as the sort of culture that came from the book, these Lean In circles that were being run,
Yeah.
they sort of did not acknowledge that fundamental reality. And obviously, that reality is not true for every single woman. Of
Right.
course not,
Right.
right? Women are not a monolith, but in general, that is the reality. And they
Yeah.
didn't acknowledge it.
Yeah. How did I remember when it came out? And I remember where, 10 years ago, gosh, I think I was at Fox Business and I was up there working. And then I remember I'd met my husband, who's Army, retired Army. And as you're talking about her example, and we forget about the recipes, and I'm guessing she probably had a nanny probably helping with the kids. A lot of us don't have the opportunity to hire a nanny, first and foremost. And the other piece of it is, even for those who are not necessarily parents, I know for myself, my husband's retired, but I too, when I've been asked to come to Washington to work and travel back and forth, that is also something I think about because my marriage is my top priority. My husband's health is my top priority. And yeah, he's significantly older, that doesn't make the difference. But those things are really things that we still, I think, are still a struggle for a lot of women and their careers. And I am thankful. I get to sit here and work most of the time. But then there are the times when I get the call to Washington, get up here. You got to do this stuff. So, I take that time and I think about that, but I think that's a struggle. I think that's still a struggle. Maybe COVID did do something for us in that because we all realized, and you cited this, we all realized during COVID that we realized what the important things were at that time because we were all home together. We were all like, okay, what do we do now? But we found a way through that to engage with one another and to reintroduce ourselves to one another as a family and as a married couple, or et cetera, et cetera. So, I'm proud of where we have come, but I also, you being a mama bear to three kids and what you are doing, what is that? How does that make you from a personal standpoint and also professional standpoint in 2023? What does that say to you? And what would you say to all the women out there from the standpoint of, what, if you are, and the reason why I say this is because I live in a retiree community here in Eastern North Carolina, but I also live in a community that is covered with military spouses, men and women. We have Cherry Point, Seymour Johnson, Camp Lejeune, Fort Bragg. And so the identity of the spouse, and I'll leave it male or female, the identity of the spouse always lends to what the service member is doing. And so the whole lean in perspective, let's just drop that right here. You know what I'm saying? And let's focus in on the reality of their life and the reality of what is ahead for them on their journeys. So, all that to say, what are your comments and your thoughts in 2023?
Oh, well, thank you so much. I think, Eden, I think technology has really been, as many ways it's a foe, right? That it
Yes.
doesn't help
Yeah.
our discourse. But
Yes.
in this way, it is a friend to women, right? The
Yes.
sense that you can do a lot of jobs um, somewhat remotely, right? The numbers on who's going into the office full time are just, staggering since the pandemic. It's so many fewer people.
Yeah.
And I think in many ways, there may be losses there of the sort of corporatized communities that a lot of people had come to rely on who were sort of in the Sex and the City demographic.
Yeah.
Do you know what I
Oh,
mean?
yeah. Oh, yeah.
But I think that there's also a lot of pluses to it in the sense that it moves a lot of production back to the home, which of course is what, had been traditionally the case. But I do think the biggest, concern and consideration going forward is that women that are not in the laptop class, right? The people
Yeah.
that actually work, you're a nurse on a hospital hallway, or you're, in a profession where you actually need to be physically present. I think that at the high end, right, you're going to have people like Sheryl Sandberg or like other women of that level of ambition who are willing to make the sacrifices that they make of family. And you know what? That's okay for them. That's not what I would do, and that's not what most women want to do. But that's
Right.
okay for them. However, you also have a lot of women that the reason they work so much is because they financially need to. Your
Yes.
average woman working as, in a blue collar, pink collar job is not there because she's looking for her personal fulfillment. Her personal fulfillment's probably coming from motherhood or from elder care or from
Yes.
all the other ways in which she's serving her community, as you mentioned, as a military spouse, for
Yes.
example. Right.
Yes.
And so there are a lot of different ways to serve community besides being a mother. But
Yes.
those ways are not necessarily as valued either in policy, right, in terms of the kind of support that we provide,
Mhm.
or in the culture in terms of the amount of value that we assign it in a social way,
Yeah, social
as
setting.
they could and should be. And while that also impacts a lot of men, there are more stay-at-home fathers, there are more dads doing the brunt of
Yeah.
childcare than there used to be, but it affects women more. And I think that's probably always going to be the case. And there's nothing wrong with that. So owning that there's nothing wrong with it, and also
Yes.
trying to create the types of solutions that enable women to have the type of balance that I'm fortunate to be able to have in my life, and it sounds like you're able to
Mhm.
have in yours, is the
Yes.
most important thing.
Yeah, no, I like what you said, enabling and understanding and realizing that the culture doesn't need to tell you what is the way it should be. You know what the right way it is and what you should be doing, and the influence that you have, whether it's in your military family, whether it's in your community service as a whole, whether it is being a cook in a kitchen or whether a mama bear at the kitchen table. So, those are all very powerful pieces of impact. Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm really grateful for your stories. What can I look for coming down the pike from you? Because I'm just loving everything that you're writing.
Oh, thank you so much, Eden. I have a review that is coming out in Law and Liberty.
Okay.
Will be out in June or July, of Josh Hawley's new book.
Oh,
So
oh
I'll be
wow.
working on that. I'm also working on a review. I have a review coming out of Curtis Sittenfeld's new novel in Real Clear Books and Culture.
Okay.
That should be out this week. And then I have another review coming out in Real Clear Books of Mary Harrington's Feminism Against Progress, which will be out next month.
Ah, okay. We're getting you back for that one. That one and Josh Hawley for sure. I cannot wait. Anders, all right, mark her down. I want her back. So, Elizabeth Grace Matthew, a Philadelphia based writer, editor. She writes about education, culture, politics, and religion. And you can see at the very bottom her website, which is absolutely great. I love your website and how you have it set up. And that's been
Thank
going
you.
across the screen the whole time. So, for such a time as this, thank you so much, Elizabeth. Many blessings to you. Look forward to maybe seeing you when I'm back in Chester County. And I'd love to meet you. And thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you, Eden. God bless you as well.
Thank you. Bye bye.